Hi everyone out there, thanks for choosing our short explanation of the game Architects of the West Kingdom. It's Chris here from JMNC Games, and today we are taking a look at one of a trilogy of games of the West Kingdom made by Garphill Games. This one is for 1 to 5 players, ages 12 and up, and the average game time is just about 60 to 80 minutes. In this game, you are sending out workers to collect resources, hire apprentices in the hopes of building buildings throughout the kingdom, and also helping in establishing the cathedral. Now, this game, when you first look at it, it's going to be like, oh my goodness, there's so much going on. But I tell you, once you understand some of the basic concepts of the game, you'll actually find it quite easy to learn. Now, while you're here, if you haven't already done so, take a moment to like and subscribe to our channel. We greatly do appreciate that. It sure does help us grow. And if you feel so inclined, you can stop by, buy me a coffee, and support the channel directly. Now, let's take a look at what's inside the box.
There's 35 clay, 40 wood, 40 stone, 25 gold, 30 marble, 50 silver coins, 10 player markers, 2 for each player's color, 100 workers, 20 for each player's color, 10 black market cards, which have 2 sides, the small and the large, 22 debt cards, which have 2 sides, paid and unpaid, 11 reward cards, 6 multiplier cards, the board, 5 player boards. They are double-sided for the standard play and variable play, 40 apprentice cards, and 40 building cards. To set up, place the board in the center of the playing area. Take the black market cards, make sure they are all facing the same direction, small and large sides. Then shuffle, then place them here on the board. Shuffle all of the reward cards. Deal out the cards in a total number of people playing the game times 2 plus 1 additional card. So for a 4-player game, that's 8 plus 1 equals 9 cards. Take those cards and place them here next to the cathedral. Return the rest back to the box. Place all of the debt cards on the side of the board by the guardhouse. Place the multiplier cards also to the side of the board. Shuffle all of the apprentice cards. Place the deck to the side of the board here. Now take the top card and place it in the box here, and repeat until all 8 slots have been filled. Shuffle the building cards. Place the deck here on the board. Take all of the supply tokens and coins and place them near the board so that all players can reach. If during the game any supplies run out, players can exchange the supplies in their possession for one of the multiplier cards. Then return the excess tokens back to the supply. For example, if I had this multiplier with these tokens, it would mean I have 5 gold and 5 stone. Take 4 silver coins and place them in the tax stand. Each player chooses a player board. For this explanation, we will use the standard side. Place the board in front of yourself and collect the corresponding workers. Place the workers on your player board. Each player should take their 2 color player markers. One is placed at the bottom of the cathedral track like this. The other is placed here on the virtue track. Everyone starts on the number 7. Now deal 4 building cards to each player face down. Players look at these cards and choose one card that they wish to keep, passing the other 3 to the player on the left face down. Repeat this process again. Now players will have 2 cards to look at. They choose one to keep, and the one not selected goes to the bottom of the building card deck. Choose a player to be first, and play will go clockwise around the board. The first player gets 3 silver from the supply. The second player gets 4, third player gets 5, and so on. It's a big setup, it's now complete. Now we'll move on to the gameplay.
Now, in order to understand the game better, there's a few concepts that you'll need to wrap your head around in order to know what's really going on. Now, the first is investing a worker.
This is where a player takes one of their workers and places it into one of these circles on the board. The more workers a player has in the circle, the more that they are allowed to do the action that is going along with that circle. So for example, if I were to place my worker here in the forest, I can take 1 token of wood from the supply. If later I place a second worker, then I would collect 2 and so on. Or say for example, I have a worker here in the king's storehouse. This allows me to turn in resources for other actions or other resources. So when I place 1 worker here, I can make 1 exchange. But later, if I place a second worker here, then it means I can do 2 exchanges and so on.
The next concept is capturing a worker. Now, once a worker is placed onto the board, it remains there until it is captured. Now, you'll want to make sure that you capture your workers before you run out. If you run out of workers, then your next turn is going to be lost by having to remove one of the workers from the board.
That worker cannot come from the black market, the guild hall, the prison, or another opponent's board. When you wish to capture workers, you send a worker to the town center. You will have to pay a fee, and then you can collect from one circle all of the workers there of the same color. The captured workers are returned to your player board for use for future turns. You can even capture your opponent's workers if you think they are getting greedy, but we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. The final concept that you need to understand is the virtue tracker. Choices that you make during the game will affect your virtue. Moving up the virtue track will score you victory points at the end of the game, while moving down will subtract them. But it's not all bad moving down. If you sit low on the virtue tracker, it will allow you to skip out on taxes during the game. So on a player's turn, they will take one of their workers from their board and choose to place it onto one of the circles on the board. Big circles like this mean that there's no limit to the amount of workers that can be placed there. The small circles at the black market indicate that only 1 worker can be placed here. Workers who are sent to the black market remain there until a black market reset. We'll go over that in a moment. Workers in the black market cannot be captured using the town center feature. These shapes at the guild hall is where workers need to be placed when constructing a building. Constructing buildings will earn you victory points at the end of the game, plus can provide other effects that are listed on the card. When you wish to construct a building, place your worker into the first available spot in the guild hall. Turn in the necessary resources, and place your new building face up next to your player board. Workers placed into the guild hall remain there for the rest of the game. You will see the indication of how many workers are placed into the guild hall based on the number of people playing the game. When someone places the final worker into the guild hall, this triggers the end of the game. All players take 1 more turn, and then the game is over. Before moving on, let's take a look at the building cards. On a building card, you will see here at the top left the items that are needed to construct that building. So for example, here is the well. I would need 2 wood and 2 stone to build this. Here in the top right shows me the number of victory points I would get at the end of the game for completing it. And here at the bottom you will see this little lightning symbol which means that this is an instant effect, and I would collect 4 clay when completing this building. Or say, for example, we are building the university. Here shows all of the supplies I need, plus I will need 1 of each kind of apprentice. We'll show you how to get those in a moment. If I complete all of the requirements, I will get 11 victory points at the end of the game. I have an instant effect of moving my virtue track up by 1. And here you will see this little flag symbol, which indicates that this effect happens at the end of the game. Which for this card is, if I have 0 debts at the end of the game, I will earn 2 extra victory points.
The symbols used at the bottom of the card are pretty easy to understand, but if you're unsure about how something works, you can always refer to the booklet of the apprentice abilities and building effects.
Another thing you can choose to build is to help with the construction of the cathedral. If you choose to do this, you would need to place one of your workers into the guild hall. Pay the indicated requirements for the level that you are moving up to. Move your marker up to that level, then collect one of the reward cards. When you reveal the reward card, you collect the items listed and add them to your inventory. For every level of the cathedral, you would need to pay 1 unconstructed building card. This card, when paid, is placed face down to the bottom of the building card deck. You will also notice that there are only so many spaces on each level of the cathedral. Only 1 person can complete to the top. If there is not an available space in front of you, then you cannot move up. Alright, enough about building. Next we'll look at the quarry and the forest. These sites work the same way, just differ on what is collected when placing a worker here. You place 1 worker in the spot and you will collect 1 of the resource indicated. If later you place a second worker, you will receive 2 of the resources indicated, and so on. For the mine, it is slightly different. When you place 1 worker, you collect 1 clay plus 1 per worker. If you have 2 workers here, you can choose to take a gold instead of the clay. 2 workers equal 1 gold. If later you were to have more, you cannot split the work. You have to choose either the clay or the gold. For the silversmith, you can collect 1 silver plus 1 for each worker located there. As we mentioned before, the king's storehouse, you can make an exchange for either marble or to move up the virtue track. The more workers you have here, the more exchanges you can make in your turn. Plus, some of the apprentices will allow you to make additional exchanges which are listed on their cards. Speaking of apprentices, we will next go to the workshop. When you place a worker here, you have 2 options. Pay the indicated costs and collect an apprentice, or collect a new building card or cards depending on the number of workers you have in the workshop. If you choose this option, you collect 1 new building card and place it into your hand. If you are going to select an apprentice, you pay 2 coins to the tax hall and 2 coins to the bank. Next, depending on how many workers you have in the workshop, will allow you to choose which apprentice. If you have 1, then you select here. 2, you select here. 3, here. And 4, here. Let's say you have only 1 worker in the workshop, but you really want this card. You would pay the normal costs, then take an additional coin and place it on top of the worker you skipped. Now you can select the card that is in the 2 worker slot. Later, when a player selects this worker, they would get to keep the coin that was left there. Once an apprentice is selected, you remove it and place it in front of you face up. Slide all of the remaining apprentices down, then reveal the next apprentice face up. Now, once you hire an apprentice, they are placed face up next to your player board. If there is an instant effect listed, take that effect. Here at the top left, you will see what type of an apprentice this card is for use in constructing certain buildings. Then at the bottom of the card, there is an additional effect. For example, if you had the woodcutter, every time you collect wood, you would collect one additional wood. Again, if you're not sure as to what effect your new apprentice brings to you, just check the Apprentice Abilities book for the full description.
You should also know that you're not allowed to have more than 5 apprentices in your playing area. Now, you can discard an apprentice at any time in order to make room for new ones. If you do discard an apprentice, you simply place it face down to the bottom of the apprentice deck. You're also not allowed to have more than 6 building cards in your hand. If you go above 6 building cards in your hand, then you must discard down to 6. Take the card that is discarded, place it face down, and place it underneath the building card deck.
Next, we look at the tax stand. When you place a worker here, you collect all of the money in the tax stand. Hooray! However, you must take your virtue tracker down by 2. Boo! When paying for things, it's easy to keep track of what goes into the tax stand and what goes to the bank. If a coin looks like this, then it goes to the tax stand. And if it looks like this, it goes to the bank. Now let's further explain the town center. When you place your first worker here, you pay 1 coin to the tax, and you can pick 1 circle on the board, including the town center, but not the black market or the prison. Then you can remove all of the workers of 1 color from that circle. If you are removing your own workers, you simply take them and place them onto your player board. If you wish, you can also capture your opponent's workers. This will stop them from being able to collect multiple resources from that area. And later, you can sell these workers to the prison, which we'll talk more about in a minute. If you capture your opponent's workers, collect them from the circle, and then place them in this area on your player board. They are kept here until either you sell them to the prison or until the owner of these workers pays the necessary fees in order to remove them. Now let's say you are placing a second worker into the town center. You would pay your 1 coin to the tax just like you did before, but you can also choose to pay 1 additional coin to the bank, and now you will be able to capture 2 sets of workers.
If it's a 2 or a 3 player game, the sets can come from different circles on the board. However, if you're playing with 4 or more players, the 2 sets have to come from the same circle.
Now, you have all of these workers that you've captured, and later you might want to cash in. And to do so, you will need to use the guardhouse. The guardhouse has several options that can be done, and you can do multiple of these actions based on the number of workers that you have placed here from previous turns. The first option is to send captured workers to prison. Take 1 of your workers and place them in the guardhouse. Now take all of your captured workers from your opponents and place them into the prison. You would collect 1 coin for each that you are placing into the prison. You would collect these coins from the bank. If you have your workers in the prison, you can place a worker into the guardhouse. And then you can free all of your workers back to your player board. Let's say one of your opponents has captured a lot of your workers but hasn't sent them to prison yet, but you need them and you've got cash on hand. You can send a worker to the guardhouse, pay 2 coins to the tax stand and 3 coins to the bank. You can then take back all of your captured workers from your opponent. Or, instead of paying the coins, you can take a debt and lose a virtue, and still retrieve your captured workers. Of course, debts are okay in the short term, but you don't want to have them at the end of the game. So best to pay off those debts by placing a worker in the guardhouse, pay 3 coins to the tax and 3 coins to the bank, and you can flip over your debt card to show that it's been paid back. The black market is a means to get things that you might need faster, but it comes at a price. There are 3 spaces in the black market, and only 1 worker can go in each of these spaces. On the first space, a player would pay 1 coin and lose 1 virtue. They would gain the 2 resources that are listed on the card below. The second space, a player would pay 2 coins and lose 1 virtue. They can either select any face-up apprentice, or they can draw 5 building cards. They look through those cards and decide to keep 1 in their hand. The rest are returned face down to the bottom of the deck. The final spot, a player would pay 3 coins and lose 1 virtue. They would then collect all of the resources listed on the space below. Once in the black market, a worker remains there until there is a black market reset. This can happen one of 2 ways. If all 3 circles are occupied by workers, or a worker is placed into the guild hall where this symbol is shown. Regardless of which way the black market reset is triggered, you would take the following steps. All workers currently in the black market are moved to the prison. The top small market card is flipped over and placed to the large market space. Any players who have apprentices who have black market reset effects may take that action in any order. All players who have 3 or more workers in prison will lose 1 virtue. The player or players who have the most workers in prison will have to take a debt card. Place it debt side up next to your player board. Once the last worker is placed into the guild hall, all players will have 1 last turn. It's now time to add up your score. Count your victory points listed from all completed constructions. Add any additional victory points from completed constructions listed at the bottom of their cards for the end of the game. Add your victory points for the level in which your marker is on the cathedral. Add or subtract your victory points from where your marker is on the virtue tracker. Lose 2 victory points for each unpaid debt. Gain 1 victory point for each marble or gold in your possession at the end of the game. Gain 1 victory point for every set of 10 coins in your possession at the end of the game. Lose 1 victory point for every 2 workers still in prison at the end of the game. The person who has the highest score after the tally is the winner of the game.
And so that's Architects of the West Kingdom. Thanks for joining us today. We sure hope you enjoyed our short presentation on Architects of the West Kingdom. And if you got any questions, feel free to drop them down in the comments below. And while you're there, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button. We greatly do appreciate that, and it sure does help the channel grow. And speaking of helping the channel grow, if you feel so inclined, the video helped you in any way at all, you can stop by, buy me a coffee, and you can support the channel directly. Well, now we know the basics, so let's play.